I don't believe we've had the pleasure of your company before, Mr.
Salas. Will Salas.
Philippe Weiss. You must come from time.
You could say I'm gambling my inheritance.
You don't have a garden, Mr. Salas?
I assumed I was amongst friends.
Bet you 50 years. You must be young. When you've been 25 for 85 years like I have, and knowing only a random act of violence can take your life, you learn to appreciate what you have.
And you seem to have a lot to appreciate. I call.
Okay, so this is like a really big pot. This is a 600-year pot of life. That is the biggest pot I think we've ever talked about on this video series. And how about this bet by Philippe here? This is a tiny bet for 50 years into 600. What are some reasons that he would be doing this, Jonathan?
Well, normally this wouldn't make any sense. And to be clear, we had to reconstruct this hand as best we could, like sort of reverse engineer it to get a sense of how did we get here? How did the pot get so big and yet Will somehow has 8-4 off? And we figure he opened the button. Philippe 3-bet the small blind with queens. Will just didn't believe the rich guy and 4-bet him big, got called. Philippe checked, called a big bet on the flop also. And that's how we got here. And now the thing is, something really key happens. Philippe finds out that Will doesn't have any more life in the bank, that he's playing with his entire life roll right now.
You could say I'm gambling my inheritance.
That 300 years he's gotten from is all he's got. And I think Philippe is worried that even if Will has a hand like pocket aces, he may not put any more years into this pot. So Philippe is trying to just start to squeeze him a little bit by betting small and sort of donking out of nowhere.
Yeah, unfortunately for Philippe, although there might be some good to that thought process, the exact type of hand that Will, aka Justin Timberlake, has here is the type of hand that is kind of obligated to call now because he's got the gut shot. And mathematically, with implied odds, you're really supposed to make this call, right?
Well, you're supposed to make this call if you have lots and lots of money and risk of ruin isn't an issue. But boy, is risk of ruin an issue in this case in particular, right? Like those are 50 years we can't get back. And if we have to fold the river, that 50 years matters in a way that it isn't like $50.
But we still have 200. We still have 200 more years in order to earn more years and build the bankroll. You know, we have a lot of time.
We do. That is fair. That's fair. At the same point, that's 50 years. That's a lot of our life. I'm just saying it's 20% of our life. We're just gonna potentially throw away on a gutter here. It's not great. And by the way, it doesn't make the nuts even if we hit it. It's not amazing. I'm not saying we should fold, but it should be more of a consideration than just, well, the pot odds say, because I'm getting 12-1, I have to call here, or 13-1, I have to call.
Now you got to go pure Vogel saying here. It's a call. It's a call.
I think I call, but I don't like it at all. I'm very uncomfortable.
A place to play poker that will never ask you to put your life on the line while playing a hand of poker is Nitrogen Sports. That's a great deal. So is their monthly tournament that you can only access if you use the link that we tweet out when we tweet about our hands. We sometimes tweet about Nitrogen as well. And if you use that link, you get access to this tournament that has a 1,000 buy-in guarantee. They never really get more than 180 players, which means there's an enormous overlay for you math nerds out there. That's a good deal. You should get a Nitrogen, get you some poker.
Of course, some think what we have is unfair. The time difference between zones.
I've heard that.
But isn't this just the next logical step in our evolution? And hasn't evolution always been unfair? It's always been survival of the fittest. Raise you another 2 centuries. This is merely Darwinian capitalism. Natural selection.
Absolutely. The strong survive. And I think your hand is weak. call.
It appears you're all in, Mr. Salas. Thirteen figures.
Okay, so first of all, that is just a ridiculously sick river. Like, come on. How insane is it that, that Will actually makes a straight with this
Well, I mean,
hand in the
Philippe
spot?
did give the right odds on the turn, to be fair.
Yeah,
There is a risk
you're
involved
right.
when you only bet 50 years on the turn, and, he got to see it through, and he saw what happens sometimes.
Yeah. If you just size it up a bit to like 80, 90 years, you're probably going to get a fold there. But I don't know. Will has 8-4 off. Who knows what Will's going to do? Anyway, whatever. We're here. The real question is, okay, Philippe should bet, right? He bet the turn he got called. Will only has 200 years left. You have to bet. The question is how to size this so we can get called.
Right. I think Philippe actually messed this up a little bit. I think he's playing this hand as if he's playing against any other rich guy that he's used to playing against, who's not going to have a problem calling off with aces or kings on this river, and just calling off 200 and then like buying in for another 600. It's fine, whatever. That is obviously not the case for Will, whose literal life is on the line. So I think in this scenario that this movie has put forth, what you need to do if you're Philippe is bet something that's almost the entire life, but not the entire life. Because obviously this is a value bet. Like we want to bet something like 175 to 190. So like in this situation where we bet 190, Will can call and still have 10 years left. And this is a guy who put his entire life on the table. That means he thinks he is really good at stuff and can get these years back. So if you give him 10 full years, maybe it's less than that because he has to, pay for stuff with his life, but whatever, 5 full years left after this hand's over, if he loses to like build it back up, he's going to think he can do that. So I think that's much better than trying to take his entire life right now. What do you think, Jonathan?
I mean, I think it's really optimistic to think two aces is going to call off to potentially die if they're wrong in the spot. I think it's just a bad idea, especially when the jack comes on the turn. So queens are beating you and jacks are beating you. That just is like a lot. Okay, you can beat kings, but that's there's 6 combos of kings and there's 3 combos of jacks and 3 combos of queens. If like cool 50-50, I die. Like, why would I do that if I can just have 200 years? You can't bet all in. I like the idea of what you're saying of betting a lot, but leaving him some room because that's real time that he can use to, like you're saying, build up his bankroll again or his life roll or whatever you want to call it and become sort of a rich guy again or just steal it from someone who's sleeping because apparently that's all you have to do in this universe. Just touch your wrist to someone else. So I like the idea of betting something like 170. I like a little bit on the lower end of that sizing to leave him a solid 30 years. So he feels like, oh yeah, I'm fine even if I'm wrong. I feel like that just activates something in the gambler's blood to like want to just put those chips in there.
Yeah, but instead he does go for it all. And now Will's in a weird spot, right? Like he has the second nuts, but it's not the nuts. And this is, you literally die if you call in and the guy has the nuts. Like, okay, it seems pretty unlikely for the guy to have 8-9 if what we think happened where Will had to have 4-bet pre-flop, or else how does he get here with 8-4, right? So like it's hard for somebody to cold call a 4-bet out of position with 8-9. So it's unlikely. But this guy's like the same as a billionaire. He's effectively a billionaire, Philippe is. So maybe he can have 8-9. I don't know. Should we think about folding with the second nuts? We still have 200 years left.
I think we should at least think about it. I don't think we can actually fold. If we're folding this hand, then why do we call the turn? We can't call the turn and fold really. But I think we should really think about it instead of calling quickly, which is what Will does when he dies every time that's not the case. By the way, 8-9 does turn double gutted. So like 8-9 flops a gutter, turns double gutted. If you're super rich, you might play it this way. I mean, it's unlikely for sure, but some percentage of the time, the really rich guy is going to show up with 8-9 here and we're just going to be dead. And we need to at least consider that, have that be part of our thought process, right? Risk
this
of ruin
is
matters, man.
this is kind of the strongest example of having a good pre-flop range mattering, right? Like you don't have to be in the spot if you don't 4-bet 8-4 off pre-flop, right? You just don't have to put yourself in this situation ever. And now you're in a situation where you're kind of obligated to call off your literal life with the second nuts. And it's really going to be too bad if the guy turns over 8-9 and you just have to die right there. But instead, Will gets to be all glib and cool about taking 600 years of a guy's life. It's kind of messed up, but whatever. And
550.
yeah.
He takes 550 of his life. And by the way, Will puts him on a weak hand. So Will thinks he's bluffing. Thank God Will didn't have aces because he's like, I think you're weak.
And I think your hand is weak. I call.
No, he's not weak. You're wrong. You would have been dead. You got super lucky to somehow have 8-4 here instead of kings or aces or something else good. 2 jacks, you'd be dead.
Well, somehow the biggest pot in the history of the breakdown is won by 8-4 off.
A lot of unusual decisions in this one. Now, it's admittedly an unusual circumstance. We don't normally see people betting actual time and potentially literally putting their life on the line as Will did here. But still, there's some things we want to talk about. The turn. Do you like the idea of suddenly donking the turn with the nuts when you know that your opponent literally only has those 250 years left in front of them and they may be reluctant to bet? Are you going to potentially scare away a bluff by doing this? Are you maybe undervaluing by only betting 50? Should he bet a different amount? As we saw, he did end up pricing in the gut shot this way. What do you think about Will's decision on the river? Actually, also the sizing for Philippe on the river, where Philippe goes all in instead of betting a lesser amount. We liked somewhere between 170 and 190. I mean, do you like an even smaller amount? Do you like a check? Let us know what you think there. And of course, ultimately, we think Will has to call with the second nuts here, but it is his life. Weigh in the comments. We can't wait to see what you have to say on this one.
Yeah, lots of high-level poker analysis in this hand. And of course, we did a podcast on this too. This is not just a little video that we did like, yeah, let's do a fun little video. No, we made a podcast. If you really want to hear about how we figured out what we think happened before the turn, the podcast is where you can find that information. Of course, more in-depth analysis, more fun. It's called the Breakdown Poker Podcast with the Poker Guys. Highly recommend it because I'm one of the hosts.